have two backup decks, a secondary deck and a tertiary deck. Control Warrior, because he believes it can fend off Bomb Warrior very
late game didn't feel like it was going his way, and RDU has shown great proficiency in this matchup already, I would say. The most flashy play of which being deliberately overdrawing cards at the end of the game so as to discard the bombs without drawing them.
I want to add one kicker to the match of RDU versus Swids, where Swids, you said he just didn't really look like he had much of a chance.
Okay.
In game number one, I think that's very true. He did not have Archivist Elysiana in the deck, and he had to have a long shot take place for it to work. You know, we saw him try to execute a very strange game plan where he held on to bombs the entirety of the game.
Yeah.
He was hoping that RDU would fail to keep a full hand so that he could seize that moment at the right time, and it never came to fruition. For Seiko here, he does include a main deck copy of Archivist Elysiana, so that game plan of the ultimate fatigue for RDU, much more difficult to obtain here than against Swids as it was in his first game.
And so getting out the gate here for both these players. I mean, I guess already there's a good talking point here in the Town Criers coming down. This is not a matchup that you may be used to in terms of Control Warrior mirrors. For example, with the Odd Warrior mirrors in the previous meta before obviously Gen and Baku were rotated through to Wild, you never drew a card in the Odd Warrior mirror, was the general idea. There was a couple of exceptions because it just always went to Fatigue and you always wanted to be that one card more in your deck so that you wouldn't die in Fatigue faster. When Archivist Elysiana enters the mix, that's when things get a little bit more tricksy, because you can quite happily draw cards throughout the course of the game, especially when you're RDU being able to bounce the Elysiana back to his hand with Brewmaster, and then follow up afterwards with replacing your deck and being in a very comfortable fatigue spot nonetheless. So even with just that first turn of the game, the Town Criers coming down sets the tone for the game, drawing cards, A-okay.
Yeah, it's pretty counterintuitive to the way that old Control Warrior decks used to play. You had no way to add extra cards to deck. And so now that's there, it's very rare you're getting to a scenario where you actually go into a deep fatigue state at post-Archivist Elysiana. Whether it's one of them or two of you won't get into a deep fatigue state. You will get into a fatigue state sometimes, but very rarely is it deep.
Well, I suppose the turn limit is a good way of saying that. Rarely will it hit the turn limit of 45 turns.
That's something that's also failed to happen in Grandmasters just yet, is the actual turn limit. There is a rule in place where the player who has the highest effective life total, which counts life and armor, emerges victorious in that.
That is the case if it's 1-0 either way. If the first game of the series ends up in a draw, both players are awarded a win.
Correct. Yeah, that's right.
I do not envisage that happening in this game because, of course, Seiko has only an Archivist Elysiana and no way to return it to his hand until he switches over to his tertiary deck later on.
It's quite rare to see, and one of the, I think, sole situations, we apologize for the tech issues here, we're getting everything set up so that we can, deliver this game very cleanly, but we have plenty of time to do that. One of the things about it is that it rarely happens, I think, in a Bomb Warrior matchup where Archivist Elysiana is involved, because the players just, by nature of their deck, they play a little bit more aggressively. And so fighting for board effectively and making sure you're delivering damaging blows happens just more often than it does when you have pure Control Warrior mirrors, where it's about creating awkward situations for opponent, where you're trying to force them to use a key resource or put them in positions where they risk overdrawing key cards from the deck otherwise.
That's right. There's a lot of counterplay that comes into fact when you have unsymmetrical decks. What's the
Asymmetrical.
Asymmetrical, that's the word I'm looking for. Asymmetrical decks, especially as we saw with Just Saiyan playing the other day, when he does not have Archivist Elysiana, I believe, in any of his warrior decks. He's going with the
Azalina
Soul Thief.
Are you okay?
There's something going on.
One warrior mirror match and Darok loses his mind.
I can't handle it, my dude. But when he didn't have any of the shuffle effects available in his deck, he just drew through his whole deck and tried to close out the game as quick as he could.
I'm going to have a very interesting point here for Seiko. With leaving a 1/3 Acolyte in play, you risk overdrawing a card. The sole reason I think he's willing to do this is because he has Archivist Elysiana, but there is still a bit of a risk to it because Dr. Boom Mad Genius is in the deck. And so for RDU here, forcing 3 draws, I think, is a very appealing prospect to have that one small, minute percentage come to fruition sometimes and absolutely outright have the possibility of winning you a game.
I disagree with that. I think the way that he is much more likely to lose this game is through Seiko having all the cards he needs early on in the game by drawing 3 cards off his Acolyte. And therefore, I think because he wins the game so much of the time, every time in the late game due to fatigue, he should be trying to mitigate the card draw from Seiko rather than maximize it to overdraw a card.
He still has time to make that, to take that chance as well. I mean, it's hard for Seiko, I think, to have real further development other than just one extra card. And so it's likely, I think, for RDU have that opportunity again.
Yeah, and I guess the way to say that is the way that Seiko wins is through pressure, a more simple way of saying it, and giving him more cards allows him to put on more pressure, and therefore RDU needs to slow that down.
I definitely agree with that point. I look at the alternative method of it, which is sometimes you just win.
Okay,
It's hard to turn down one play being such a substantial edge.
What's
As Derek, apologies for that, he's flabbergasted by my brilliance, of course, in this scenario.
As I was about to say before I so rudely interrupted myself, at this point we're comparing likelihoods of victories. So it's, do you think you are more likely to win by overdrawing exactly Dr. Boom or Elysiana? Or are you more likely to win by just beating your opponent over the natural course of the game, given they have weaker draws because you haven't triple activated their Acolyte?
It's definitely an interesting point. I guess what comes to my head is that I don't think that forcing your opponent to draw 3 cards is likely to lose you the game, because you're effectively drawing them 2 cards as one of the cards gets burned away. So their natural draw for the turn goes away. The Acolyte, I think, is quite often going to draw 2 cards.
Okay.
You also get a 3/4 in play.
It's true. I mean, well, it probably wasn't the play there, but I was looking at Ziliax was the kind of the next step. But as we see here, Shield Slam does the same similar job here. I think RDU's coming to the same conclusion as me, that he just needs to take this game slow. Just take it nice and slow at his own pace, because as the game develops, he will win. Dr. Boom's in his hand. It could very well not be in Seiko's hand. We can see it isn't. So RDU knows he possibly has a big advantage there and just needs to take things lovely and slow, and he'll always come out on top, or should usually come out on top.
I definitely agree with that. And with the play that he made, that's clear that's his thought. I think it's a wise choice. I mean, he has Dr. Boom in hand.
And don't get me wrong, it's absolutely something he will have thought about. It's a massive consideration, because if you can just win the game on the spot, obviously you take that. It's just, it was a very, very slim chance to be doing that. It was, what, just straight up 1 out of 30 unless he kept any cards off the mulligan. To burn, oh, I guess 1 out of 15 for Dr. Boom or Elysiana.
Yeah. And then also just the math of being in hand. It pans out some weird way. Some math
if he didn't keep any cards, then it's perfectly random.
Some math wizard out there knows, and I don't care to explain it. It's way too long.
Well, actually, I guess he's played cards
I guess
already.
I have time to explain it.
No. That's boring. But either way, we're seeing the game plan here following up from Seiko, which is, I would say, in contrast from the way Swids was playing, or at least it appears to be, in that Seiko is playing these bombs. He's trying to get them in the deck as quick as he can, maybe to activate straight away, maybe he hopes to save for a Blast Master Boom, of course, that activates more boom bots for the bombs in your opponent's deck. Whereas Swids was waiting until after Archivist Elysiana had been played, then going in with all the bombs. It didn't work out for him because RDU was able to overdraw the couple of bombs in his deck, and then when he played Archivist Elysiana, he was so ahead on board and fatigue that it didn't really make any difference.
Yeah, again, Swids was not the luxury of having an Archivist Elysiana,
yes.
and Seiko is.
That's true.
That changes the landscape a lot. So I think battling for pressure and chipping away at armor, especially if your opponent has played an early Dr. Boom, actually has more merit because they don't have that natural armor effect again. You know, they're going to roll 7 armor at a time, but over the course of that time, if you just count for the natural effect of the Warrior Hero power, it is a technical loss of armor if you were able to reserve that 2 mana every time.
Oh. And therefore, as you were just saying, given that it gives you a technical higher percentage of armor the majority of the time, does he just slam the Dr. Boom that came off the top here? Or maybe not
Seiko,
this turn.
definitely. For Seiko, the pressure means more, in my opinion, because he's not under the threat of bomb damage. The threat that he's under is just being gassed out. And so for RDU, I think that's really the big thing to look at, is Dr. Boom for him, I think is important, but means less than it does for Seiko.
It's... Why? Because I think I actually disagree with you there, because RDU, in terms of board control, is playing defensively, right? It's more important for him to keep the board clear than it is for Seiko. Dr. Boom, it doesn't really allow... I mean, it does allow you to get board control by taking the value trades, but it's better at keeping the board clear than it is at getting minions in play. I agree it's pivotal for both players.
Yes. I mean, at some point, RDU needs a Dr. Boom, no doubt. I approach it from the perspective of, you have Warpaths, you have Whirlwinds, you have Execute. Like, when are you going to use these? Like, you're going to... If you rely on the Dr. Boom the whole time, you boom, you end up with 10 cards in hand the entirety of the game. You don't need 10 cards in your hand.
So what? Why wouldn't you want that, though?
But you don't need it.
It also, I mean, if you can't get that up to that critical mass of hand size, up to 9 or 10 cards, that's when you can start deliberately overdrawing bombs, which is a big facet.
That is a big deal. I will concede that point. But here, 1 damage. Nice.
Well, I mean...
What has Dr. Boom actually done for RDU so far?
Well, I mean, not much yet, right? It's just the fact that as the game develops, it's
a percentage thing.
It's also the threat of Dr. Boom rather than what it's actually doing right now. It's the fact that Seiko will have an incredibly difficult time sticking anything on the board throughout the course of this game.
You might be able to sell me with that. The threat of the power is inherently a large portion of the power of Dr. Boom.
Yeah.
Okay. You haven't sold me yet, but I'm at least picking up the item and looking at it.
Am I winning an argument? Is this finally happening?
I don't view it as winning and losing arguments. I view it as perspective.
Okay.
It sounds like I'm trying to win the argument. I just have an angry resting voice.
Well, that's how you would view the argument. You're a loser.
Harrison here is a real amount of pressure.
Yeah. So,
this is an awkward turn.
I mean, it's an awkward turn because it's like, how do I best deal with this with all my many, many removal cards that RDU has access to? The Ziliax, you probably want to save it to magnetize onto something, given that it's such a slow matchup here, and you will have the time to do that. So instead, he's probably looking more closely at... Weapons Project? I think he's not. He wants to go with the Zillion.
All right. I'm curious about this.
Me too. I think, like, a lot of the other cards in hand are pretty much as good as they're going to get. Like, Weapons Project here, you know, you take a little bit of damage swinging into it, but that's not too bad. Going for a Warpath there, you already have 2 in hand.
Yeah.
Ziliax has a huge ceiling in terms of how good it can be.
I also feel like Warpath's one of the weaker cards in the matchup. Like, there are situations where it can be very good, but I think for the most part, it's just overall pretty weak. I would say one of the best uses for it is you're able to stick your own security rover from a discovered effect.
Yes. As we now see for Seiko, the immediate rip of the Omega Assembly. It's not terrible options. Like, RDU would much rather have this Vicious Scrap Hound plus Ziliax to counteract the bombs that are coming through from Seiko.
I think Seiko has got a pretty big advantage after that assembly. The Scrap Hound Ziliax is just so powerful.
Yeah, it's nuts. Kind of an aside point, but I love the art on Vicious Scrap Hound as well. It's just cool.
Job done. So Seiko now with a wealth of minions and able to start getting ahead with Omega Assembly in terms of minion count.
Yeah,
I think feels pretty comfortable trying to force brawls in this situation and begin the process of trying to overwhelm RDU.
Absolutely, and this is what this is the benefit of his draw-heavy lines of play. This is the effect of it. This is his reward. Is by going for plays like Weapons Project Harrison, just throwing down the Acolytes early on and things like that. He has the juice because he's drawn through to it. Whereas RDU, on the other hand, his card draw, as you can see in the card counts on the right-hand side, has been a lot less, and so he hasn't found the threats, and therefore Seiko has amassed a much higher health total with armor and health put together at 50, and he's just got more threats to follow up with after RDU clears.
Yeah, something that I look at with the deck list as well is just the threat count in general. It's pretty close, but as innocuous as it seems, you know, 2 Clockwork Goblins and just that, and 2 Wrench Calibers, like that alone is enough, I think, to swing the damage race pretty heavily in favor of Seiko.
Which, again, is why the talk around the water cooler, as it were, in Hearthstone is that the Bomb Warrior is pretty good in this matchup. It just gets that damage in by drawing heavily and putting bombs in deck.
I never want to pass up a laser.
Say what you will about Nathan Zamora. He never passes up a laser.
That's just 3 damage gone forever.
So how much likely is that to be better? You are very likely to end up in a situation where you can get more boom bots than that. I think that's taken for granted.
I do like the play.
Yes.
The reason I like it is because RDU does not have armor. So it's much more difficult for RDU to land a clean shield slam in this situation.
Great point.
And I think that's exactly what Seiko's thinking about is not only can the pressure mount up and be a big deal, which it definitely does, but also just the fact that RDU, if he wants to shield slam this, he has to have armor generation immediately.
Obviously, we can see the double execute that he is running in his pure control warrior, as opposed to the bomb warrior, is looking pretty good for him. Being able to just take out this last master beam very nice and easily. And then, I mean, I guess he probably wouldn't follow up with the Kaboom bot because you'd rather utilize that as just an immediate removal spell, effectively later on in the game with the rush that Dr. Boom affords.
I definitely think the execute is much tougher to use.
Yes.
So I like the situation he's gone for there. Thank you, Spectator, for the highlights on the cards that are there. I really appreciate that. It's tough to keep track of everything that happens just because it's so many UI effects that occur in one turn.
God, I wish Hearthstone would stop being so colorful and fun to look at.
Say the magic word.
What's the point of art anyway?
It just gets in the way from the raw numbers and stats.
Pictures are for morons that aren't human calculators.
Got him. Sorry, my hand's very sweaty.
Thanks for the clarification on that one. I'm certain everyone watching right now is thinking, that sounded like a high five. I wonder if Darok's hands are sweaty.
I don't know. It's kind of a wet high five, they might have been wondering.
It's very rare you get, the prime missile launcher turn. That is one of the best missile launcher turns that I have ever seen.
Really? Have you been playing Mech Hunter recently?
I'm not going to count Toxicologist.
Okay.
Because that's Toxicologist turns, in my opinion.
Or
I'm sorry, not Toxicologist. What is it called? Venomizer.
Venomizer, there you go.
Toxic Venomizer? It's a 2-mana 2/2 magnetic poisonous.
Yes, that was up there in a non-Venomizer version.
RDU with his usual inquisitive and slightly worried face.
It's fair enough. This is an undecided point in the game. There's been a very similar situation on the board here for a good long while, right? With Seiko on the front foot, on the aggressive, slowly chipping down the armor total. Very, very slowly, but it's definitely happening. And RDU really has not turned the corner yet into feeling perfectly safe. So as soon as Seiko starts to find those key bomb cards later on, RDU could be looking to be in a little bit of trouble. Especially as RDU still has not found Archivist Elysiana, so Seiko could still discover Hecklebot into getting the Elysiana.
Ah, yeah, it's true.
It's unlikely, of course, but it's possible.
It's ever present.
So I suppose the two premium mech discovers for him at the moment are Hecklebot and arguably Mechathune. It's possible that he gets the Mechathune victory here still, I think.
Mechathune victories are weird, but
they
definitely can happen. I've had one so far as Bomb Warrior, where I discovered the Mechathune early, and I actually used Archivist Elysiana on with 11 or 12 cards left in my deck.
Oh yeah, of course, he's still got. Well, I guess
it was after I was discussing with Sottle about that.
Right, right.
The matchup with Firebat versus Frozen yesterday, Firebat was in such a long shot to win the game.
Yeah.
It's like he had to take super desperate moves to try to fight off because one of the side decks for Frozen was a Mechathune deck. And so I was looking at it and go, how early can you justify playing Archivist Elysiana? You're already in a situation that is horribly desperate. And it was just a really interesting talking point. So I played through some Warrior games and I eventually found a situation. I got it early and I went, wow, this is weird.
Yep.
Archivist Elysiana with 11 cards left in my deck.
You've got to play to your outs. If you know that fatigue isn't a possibility, I mean, we're seeing Seiko do exactly that. Even though he is at least 10 cards behind on fatigue after RDU gets 2 activations of the Archivist Elysiana, he's drawing. He's making the situation worse for him, arguably, because he knows he never wins through that method anyway. So he has to go for other outs.
Oh, I love that fuse thing.
That card is so good.
Yeah. It's insane. I mean, even just a 4-mana 4/5 mech would still have some reason to be playing it, to magnetize with Ziliax.
2 very interesting options to me. Security Rover, I feel like it's just one of the most annoying cards I face against off of the Discover from Dr. Boom. But at the same time, you just put Clockwork Goblin in your deck. It's really hard to pass that in my eyes.
It's a good card to be discovering. Security Rover, just for the nostalgia's sake of a kind of a budget Grim Patron deck. I appreciate that. It's really tough, and Seiko does not know. He's not running Elix in his deck, and therefore the power of Clockwork Goblin is obviously mitigated somewhat.
Goodness, that's a tough choice. It's just hard for me to pass up a card that I naturally put in my deck.
And he's just throwing it down. He's keeping up with his game plan here of just turboing out these bombs. I guess because even if he waits for the first Elysiana to be played and then go for the bomb shuffles, RDU could very happily just play the second Elysiana while he's still got 7 or 8 of the cards left in his deck from the first one to destroy the bombs.
It takes so long for that plan to come to fruition, and it can be disrupted, that I think there's a lot of incentive for doing it early and just securing the damage.
I agree. And I wouldn't be too surprised if at some point when Seiko finds the rest of the good cards in his deck, I believe that being one more Wrench Caliber, a couple more bomb cards at least. Once those are found, I very much expect to see just ripping an Archivist Elysiana, trying to find some premium discovers.
Yeah. Seiko's getting pretty gassed out, all things considered. I always love me a good old-fashioned Eternium Rover Beryllium Nullifier play.
Defend the gates!
I love anything with Beryllium Nullifier. That card is so cool. I guess there's the check for it now in Omega Devastator.
Ooh, don't Hecklebot.
What do we got here?
He rips it in the hope that the card that's been on the far left of Seiko's hand for the entirety of the game is not Archivist Elysiana.
It's so funny how your perception of Hecklebot flips, where when he gets a 1/3 out of his opponent's deck, I'm like, rubbish. But if he was to summon a 7/7 from his opponent's deck,
yeah!
Whoa! I'm behind on board!
Excellent! This is exactly what I wanted. If you think about it, that's the entire nature of the card Brawl. Ooh, I hope my opponent plays so many minions that this is my only option.
I still remember when I first started playing Hearthstone, where when I was playing Warrior, I would preload the board with my own minions for the Brawl. So I was like, "Poor, his guy is never going to survive now after I've committed my entire hand onto the board." And there we go. Archivist Elysiana now found for RDU means he is secured in his fatigue game plan.
Pretty interesting turn here as well, where RDU has an opportunity, I think, to have a multi-minion play here, where you get to Omega Devastator and try to preserve the 5 health on it by using Dynomatic.
Oh, okay. Just as the rush.
The one thing to keep in mind is that Archivist Elysiana in empty board positions, when both players are rolling into turns they need to play it, can generate a lot of tempo. Because you don't have an answer to a 7/7. And that's often one of the reasons I see players hold Dynomatic in the matchup, is to ensure they have a way to offset an Elysiana turn.
That's true. That's more so a facet in the Baleful Banker versions than it is in the Youthful Brewmaster versions, which I know is a reason why you and I both tend to prefer the Baleful Banker, I think, than the Youthful Brewmaster, because obviously there are uses for Youthful Brewmaster. It's more useful in the aggro matchups, we can both agree.
Right, it's a useful Brewmaster.
It's a very useful Brewmaster. But the Baleful Banker, leaving a 7-7 on board in the control matchups makes such a big difference, doesn't it?
Something else to consider too is the way that RDU's tertiary deck is built, where the 5 cards he changes into with that are 2 Inner Rage, a Galvanizer, a Slam, and a Mechathune. Having the Youthful Brewmaster in the main deck means that he gets to activate the Galvanizers in a different way. It means he can expend one, and it means he can still have a plan for Archivist Elysiana and use a Brewmaster just simply for value's sake throughout the meantime. It goes with the game plan of having Galvanizer activate for Mechathune and still having the flexibility of expending one.
He takes out the Youthful Brewmaster, though.
Does he take it out?
Yeah, he takes out
What the heck?
Brewmaster and Elysiana.
Okay, well that...
Well, I mean, it kind of makes sense, right? Like, he has a game plan with Mechathune in his tertiary deck, which is to reduce it by 1 and then shield slam it.
I'm a big dum-dum. I apologize.
I agree.
This happens once every Warrior match, where no matter who it is, no matter what caster it is, there's a giant stupid thing that gets said, and mine is always just in the worst spot possible. That's unlucky.
Really? Of all the things you could say...
It's unlucky that I'm this dumb. Yes, fair.
What a low roll in life. As I believe we have a new record for armor total today, up to 70 for Seiko, which obviously helps in the fatigue state. He still has 10 cards left in the deck now that Elysiana has come down.
Look at this. RDU going to take the opportunity to rip his own Elysiana. And that means a Brewmaster's coming. He says this is the first secure turn I get to do it, because he's not going to get tempoed out in this situation by doing it. I actually think this is quite clever.
And so here, not premium options. The Sightless Ranger is just a bit of stats. Seaphorium is nice. Darius Crowley is more removal, though, which is definitely tempting. BGH and Corcoran Elite both have their benefits. If your opponent has discovered large minions...
Thinking Boom Reaver?
Yeah.
I'm going to hover on these Elysianas, and hopefully... So RDU, so we're going with the first one. First one is Flightmaster, Bulldozer.
Darius Crowley, Sulthraze.
Okay.
And Stampede Encoder.
Second one, Project, Rat. 3/4 Rush that summons Bats on Overkill. Bombers, and BGH.
Just to make sure that we are...
Thank you very much, production.
The most up-to-date on the information, as... It's got to be said, for neither side there, I would say, are there game-breaking cards. Those are all just reasonably sized minions for the most part.
This would be a good time for a
I'm looking at the damage that Seiko can secure from Sulthraze.
Yes, that definitely helps.
And I'm
just
looking,
16 damage for both of them.
And I'm looking at the damage or the random discover effects that RDU could get from Evil Cable Rat or from the Seaphorium Bombers. This is kind of interesting.
Yeah, obviously if you get Cable Rat into exactly... the Ethereal Lackey for a spell, that is when you're really talking.
I'm quite interested in that prospect.
Could still go either way, obviously. The fatigue, you know, the point is, I suppose, to frame this matchup at this point, now that we are reaching an Elysiana state for both players. Seiko has to kill RDU. If both players carry on evenly here, RDU will win in the long run. And when RDU is making plays such as this, maybe a little bit difficult for Seiko to do.
Yeah. That's a pretty tough turn for Seiko. He really has to consider what the hero powers mean at this point and what they actually do. 7 armor for Seiko at this point, I think, means next to nothing.
Okay. It's so hard for me to wrap my head around because 7 armor is so good in like every situation.
You just said it. He's the aggressor right now.
Yep. He's just got to kill.
He's the one who has to deliver damage.
And like, I guess that it gets you perhaps another turn in fatigue, opting to press that button. But the damage that you would take by not like effectively clearing the board there is more scary for you.
Yeah. I do look at that turn and wonder, you know, is Shield Slam more effective? Because of how much life of the Boom Reaver you're expending. But he saw a BGH from RDU's deck, so he wanted to, I think, secure the value from it and still have a pretty sizable body there that, you know, requires something. The problem is that RDU just had laser active.
Yeah, and he knew that, of course.
Yeah. Oh, look at that. That is quite clever.
Why is this not in the main deck?
I'm thoroughly impressed.
Look at the combo. I mean, to be fair, it's pretty strong. The board still gets cleared. But, I mean, actually, how easily does it get cleared? Hero power plus Dynamatic does not quite get there.
I guess that's really the question, is RDU has some pretty effective plays to take care of stuff, where, like, the Dynamatic plus the Sightless something. It's the 3/4 rush that summons
Sightless
bats.
Ranger.
Sightless Ranger.
It is a Ranger without sight.
Somehow effective.
It's because it's cool cards, because it's got like bats who use like the sonar to tell him what to do. I think it's a flavorful card.
I typically use sonar to find snacks.
You can tell from the reverberations in the air what flavor a packet of crisps are. You're just like, beep, 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 beep. Sour cream and onion.
My favorite. With RDU pulling ahead on board, that does not spell a good point for Seiko.
Yep, that spells disaster. 4 times Warpath plus the hero power does clear the board, however. But clearing the board is only the first step. He really needs to wrestle this back. Bulldozer helps, obviously.
Yeah.
Because it's a big old minion.
The timing of this is quite awkward for Seiko as well, where he's giving RDU a turn where there's very little development on Seiko's side, so he gets to very easily shift in 7 armor in this spot. You know, Seiko's been working the whole game to try to contain that. And here, RDU just has a free open pass and saves the Sightless Ranger for the ideal situation, a clear board on the other side.
Yep. Very nicely going a little bit wide on the board. It shouldn't be too difficult for Seiko to deal with, but
he's getting the ideal situation with a Dynamatic versus 5 health.
The mortal enemy of a Ranger and 2 bats.
A machine.
Wargear?
Wargears, I think, much more appealing than Safeguard.
Wow.
So Safeguard would be to just simply protect the presence he had on board.
Yeah, yeah, okay, I guess if he can stick... So I guess Wargear is the optimistic play there, saying, when I stick something, I'll magnetize this on. Safeguard is the pessimistic play, saying, I don't think I ever will stick anything on board, so I need to do this on the same turn as something else so that I can stick something.
He also currently has a Wargear in hand, so Safeguard helps to secure a board position and then magnetize onto the body it leaves behind.
Yeah. I guess you're right. It's obviously a 2-turn play he'd have to make, which is where things start getting very sketchy.
It's pretty cool. Brawl expended here. I honestly didn't quite expect that.
It's aggressive. I mean, he had no other mechs in hand to clear things off, which is where things could start getting scary for RDU now. The minions that he discovered and are in his deck are not especially powerful. So for Seiko, with a hand that is, quite frankly, for this stage, full of juice.
Yeah, this is about to get scary, I think.
This could get rough for RDU. He has, like, you know, for the moment, another board clear here. Hero power, trade everything in, execute is a clear.
Big draw.
Big Game Hunter is an even easier way to clear off the board, though. Big Game Hunter's been kind of big today.
He totally lied to me there. He did not have the beast in his sights. He had the mech in his sights, and these little things clear up the beast.
Literally unplayable.
That Boom Reaver is very likely to come down in the next couple of turns because the number of minions in Seiko's deck are starting to run out. And I like the use of Soul Thrace here. The Soul Thrace here clears off the board and starts setting up for the fact that he's got another one in his deck.
He could just swing face as well, right? He's wondering if he should even waste a charge on a 1/1, I think is the consideration.
I think so as well. Or in general? Interesting.
That is interesting. I was fully expecting a swing face then.
I mean, RDU, he anticipates not having any more weapon destruction, so having a surprise of the weapons project come out,
that has to be wrong.
It does seem weird to me because there's so many turns left to go.
There's 2 weapons projects in the deck left for RDU as well. I mean, maybe Seiko's thinking
he didn't know that, though.
Yeah.
And now a Darius gets drawn. That would have been like almost the perfect grab from the Boom Reaver. And Seiko just going big on board.
Yeah. While I think he maybe missed a little bit of swing damage there from RDU, you could understand his reasoning. And obviously, it wasn't a strict misplay, but still, once again here, RDU is able to clear the mid.
And this is really important for Seiko that he has such a big hand right now. It's going to pressure RDU, and he's going to have to find a way to play an Elysiana and wrestle back the board. Because right now, he's giving up initiative for this clear. Seiko's not anywhere close to out of gas.
And so because Seiko knows that the Archivist Elysiana is in hand, his game plan immediately is never give RDU that wiggle room. Make him play his removal instead of the Elysiana every single turn. One bomb from the Sephorian Bomber.
And Solthrace is the last card in deck now for Seiko, which means that Boom Reaver is not summoning a minion.
It's still a 7-9, right? Like, you just take whatever you can get.
Yes, I definitely agree. But
especially when you have the Kaboom hero power, which is definitely the worst one at this point. Or probably the worst one.
pretty easy Archivist Elysiana turn here.
This story deserves a new ending.
Obviously, you could even pull up with a swing and an execute.
I'm actually curious about the execute because you still take the 7 damage.
Yeah, yeah.
I wonder if you're free to wait and just get the cable rat online.
This is a lot less
Yeah,
juicy.
that is not
Fiery
good.
War Axe? Yeah, I think I agree.
Phantom Militia is interesting.
You've seen one Soul Thrace, so you do know that there's another.
You have a weapons project backup.
That's
though.
true, that's true.
Dimensional
Ooh,
Ripper.
Dimensional Ripper is very big. And then we got it. Armani Warbear, Fiery War Axe, Phantom Militia, War Gear, and Dimensional
That is
Ripper.
a good set of discoveries.
So 2 out of 3 times, he gets a really nice minion off of the Dimensional Ripper. Obviously with the Warbear being premium.
I really think RDU should be playing this Evil Cable Rat here. He is not the aggressor in the matchup. The Evil Cable Rat gets him a lackey in this situation. Albeit his hand is quite expendable, but I think part of the thought process is A, he would be foregoing a hero power, and then B, he can throw the Cable Rat down for an emergency brawl situation.
Yeah, I mean, he could even go Cable Rat and Lackey and Brawl, which I think is perfectly reasonable.
You stick the Brilliant Nullifier
Yep.
on...
Yeah, I agree.
Why didn't we stick it on the Boom Reaver?
He seemed
I
to
guess
be
the safeguard helps him secure a board presence even in the face of clear here, and then you get to stick Brilliant Nullifier. Interesting.
It was very tempting, though, to go for the Brilliant Nullifier there. I guess he's thinking Omega Devastator plus Rush is where he maybe starts to fall behind.
His hand is still very big.
Yeah.
I'm pretty worried here for RDU. Yikes.
And this is sticky. This is the benefit from Seiko of going for the Safeguard, obviously, over the War Gear earlier on in the game. Because he ends up with an annoying minion to deal with, even though the 0-5 taunt that's left over afterwards is not particularly threatening to RDU immediately in its own right. The protection that it gives to the other minions is really where the power comes from.
Seiko now into fatigue. He has to win with what he's got here and whatever hero powers come up. I am shocked that he's not using Brilliant Nullifier.
He just wants 2 big minions on the board. I think he's utilizing the power of the taunt from Safeguard while he can. I think it's a good way to go about it.
It is an excellent point because if RDU is, forced into a brawl scenario, if one of your minions lives, you then get to follow up on a clean position.
That's right. That's probably the worst one that he could have found there. I guess most of them probably didn't do too much. Ethereal Lackey was fantastic, and Faceless Lackey could have given him even more chance to win the brawl.
I think we're looking at a brawl situation.
Scrap Hound first?
Double time.
I think I want the 7 armor.
Let's do it.
Big turn here for RDU. Succeeds in the efforts.
The best possible option.
That is not good news.
Devastating
for Seiko.
For Seiko. 0 cards left in his deck. He has to win with what he has in hand, and maybe a discovery of the delivery drone if he's so fortunate. Only 2 fatigue though. He's still got a little while to work with. Just 3-4 turns.
He's got plenty of time to get his cards active, and that's the key.
And here we have it. The untargetable minion. Only with 3 attack. This is significantly less threatening.
Think back to
some of
that
the time
4
you could have
damage
played it.
that Seiko missed.
Yeah.
4 damage from that Soul Thrace.
It's true. As now RDU praying that he finds the Armani Warbears. It still taunts. It still keeps him alive.
Well, I'm looking at a Kodome, and I'm looking at a Darius.
Okay, that's actually pretty bad.
And he knows that RDU doesn't have AoE in this spot. Unless it's from Elysiana. I think RDU's in trouble.
So what does RDU do? How is this the final board that sticks around? This is the final wave from Seiko, and it might just be too much for RDU.
Another Phantom Militia drawn.
So he plays that to stall?
I mean, Seiko has a Soul Thraze to chew through it.
Whoa! The Sulphur is coming. Oh no, wait, it doesn't have overkill. It kills it exactly, so it can't attack twice.
Oh, you're right.
So we could kill off one of them, which is not bad, but not the dream.
RDU's got to figure something out. This is, I think, a technically solvable puzzle. If he's tracked perfectly for Seiko's hand, he knows that it's Brawl and Soul Thrace as the last two cards.
Does he though? Because did Seiko wait until he'd drawn his entire deck before he played at least?
Ah, no, that's true.
Right.
He had not waited that.
So he does know that one of the cards is Soul Thrace, if he's been keeping track.
Does not know what the Brawl is.
Yes. He can presume it's something relatively unoffensive.
It has been there for a long time.
Right, which is why I'm saying he'll expect it to be something like Brawl or Warpath, or a reactive card.
I don't know what the right play is here.
I think he's just going to end up going triple Phantom Militia in the end. Well, he wants the hero power as well.
The armor's worth more than...
I guess so. I guess so.
The other militia.
Here we go. These are going to be chewed through by Darius Crowley and co.
Yeah, Darius Crowley farming up. RDU with a mech discovery online. Could be critical.
Let's start with the delivery drone. See what we're getting here for Seiko.
Oh,
Those
boy.
are some pretty good options.
Those are very good.
So does he go for it now with the mechanical whelp? He can use the 2/2 to attack in.
I think you have to have some amount of priority on Vicious Scalehide in fear of RDU getting a big discovery.
Do you mean on mechanical?
No, on the opposing Vicious Scalehide. That I think that needs to be
Scrap Hound, sorry, the Scrap Hound.
Scrap Hound,
Yeah,
sorry.
sorry.
The mechanical version of Vicious Scalehide.
Robo Hound.
You have to have some priority on that. You obviously want the Darius to connect or to farm bigger. So I think the goal here is to connect as much as possible, which means use the 7/7 to clear up, use 3/9 to kill Scrap Hound.
Yep.
Darius connects. He's got enough items, that's going to have to be big enough. You need to join the team fight, Darius.
This is unbelievably close. So RDU can still hit Dimensional Ripper into Armani Warbear. Is that even good enough at this point, though?
I think it's definitely good enough at this point.
Well, that's one Armani Warbear. That helps, obviously. We could see Warbear Warax.
Well, we're starting with Discovery. You do not pass up Discovery at this point because Omega Devastator is exactly that right now. It's devastating.
Okay.
He's considering it, though, and he really does need to consider it because it's pretty close to a solvable puzzle.
Oh, imagine if he did get the Devastator, though.
You have such a big chance to discover it.
What else can he hit that's really good? Security Rover is decent. Ziliax is obviously good. Dynamatic is fine. Oh! These are not fine! These are the opposite of fine.
That's bad. That's really bad. That's the best one. Seiko leaning forward. He's thinking to himself, am I actually gonna win?
It seemed impossible. RDU was killing everything the whole game. This is where RDU starts thinking back to the aggressive brawls he was using early on. His aggressive use of removal. Maybe he should have kept just one card. Maybe he should have delayed Elysiana. So much to consider as Seiko closes down to a victory.
Seiko needs to consider securing an overkill with this Soul Raise here as well. How much long-term damage does it sacrifice?
I wonder if he can get lethal on this turn. 7, 16.
7, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17.
Does he have exactly 22?
I did not count 22 at all.
Oh, those have rush. Those have rush. Sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah. Not, yeah. Okay. Right. So if those if
But
those
already
attack,
used it
it
too.
would have been 22. He needs to survive. He needs to do something spectacular this turn, and Fiery War Axe is not that. He's just dead.
Overrides the Soul Raise, goes up to 8. 2 Phantom Militias?
That does not get there. The Darius doesn't die. The Mechanical Whelp does not die.
It gives him another draw? Is Laser better than Eternium Rover? Right now, Darius... 7, 8, 9. He's looking at 10 damage here.
If he zaps a 1/1,
He's still
doesn't
looking.
do it. If he rushes in the Eternium Rover, doesn't do it.
Oh, I love that fuse thing.
He just has to hope that Seiko messes up. Seiko's not going to mess up. And somehow, it's lethal.
I'm double and triple checking. That's lethal.
Every way you slice it, that's 9 points of damage.
An unbelievable way to close out this game. What are the odds that the absolute final onslaught from Seiko would be what closes it out over RDU?
Unreal.
What a first way to start this series out, with the Control Warrior for RDU up against the Bomb Warrior for Seiko. Even with RDU taking the loss in that game, it's looking like
It's been immensely bolstered because now there's 2 things that happen. Number 1, if his pressure plan fails, he has Alexstrasza to deal 15 damage. Number 2, if his pressure plan doesn't fail, he has Grommash to deal 12 immediate damage.
and tertiarily, if his initial plan and his backup plan fail, he can just go for the Elysiana, shuffle it in with Baleful Banker. He's equal in fatigue.
This is a beautiful plan here for Seiko, as RDU has stayed on the primary deck, so no card changes from the previous game. The players bring an initial deck, and then 2 decks that are up to 5 cards different in the following.
Yeah, Seiko is looking very much in the lead
Whoa.
in this game. But he has just done something which I did not expect to occur.
I am extremely surprised.
Does he need to play the beatdown to such a degree that he needs to play Omega Assembly on 1 just to smooth out his curve?
He didn't do it last game.
Did he have it in his starting hand?
No, but I don't. Would he have done it last game? I would argue that
yes.
the Omega Assembly is one of the reasons he won the last game.
Yeah, I still think if he had it in his starting hand, he would have gone for it to try and smooth out his curve.
Interesting.
Because that was his win condition, right? Or that was what he intended his win condition to be. You got to think, you get into his head. I think he was trying to curve out as aggressively as he could, draw as aggressively as he could, in order to just smooth out his curve and get onto the board as quick as possible.
I'm interested. I'm skeptical, but I'm interested.
It's a good position to be in. Shows you're a keen thinker.
Well, let's not just tell people lies. I would argue that Seiko has found the 3 most important cards in the deck.
I would agree. Wait, which 3?
Blastmaster Boom, Archivist Elysiana, and Dr. Boom Mad Genius.
Oh, okay.
Not necessarily in that order.
I agree with the 2 booms. I was going to say, well, Elysiana is one of the most important cards in the matchup, undeniably. It's not one of the most important cards to draw at the start.
Agreed. Not at the start.
Alexstrasza is, I think, much more crucial to draw towards the start of the game.
I guess that is probably why the Omega Assembly stands out to me, is if your plan is to curve out as aggressively as possible, you're containing armor at that point, which opens you up to Alexstrasza not getting checked by a shield slam. However, the aggression factor doesn't matter as much when you have an Alexstrasza, because you want that effect to be maximized. Like, you're sacrificing a pretty great deal of resources to try to secure that damage.
I think it's a pretty safe assumption, though, that your pressure on board will not be able to equal their armor generation throughout the course of the game up to turn 9. Like, the idea that you will draw such a perfect curve that you can not only erode all their armor, but also damage them to the extent where Alexstrasza is not still a fantastic play. I think it's very likely that Alexstrasza, even if he just curves out perfectly, will deal the full 50. Or at least a good chunk of it. Having said that, I still would not have played the Omega Assembly on turn 1. However, I'm not Seiko. I'm not one of the best players in the world like he is.
True story. True story. Very few people are Seiko. In fact, only one person is.
Arguably one. It's a convincing argument, but it's still arguable.
Unless he's like that scene from the Three Amigos where they're just everywhere. Everywhere they looked in the village after El Guapo raided the village. There were the Three Amigos everywhere. There were hundreds of them.
I know you're going to hate me, but I haven't seen that film.
Well, I assumed you had.
I'm aware of its existence.
RDU uses Omega Assembly early.
They are playing aggressive with these cards here.
I guess it is a nod to hand size, where a lot of times you're just going to struggle to be able to effectively play things. Like RDU, one of the nightmares of just tempoing out a militia commander is actually your opponent has a Dynamatic. It's weird to say, but Dynamatic's one of the best answers to militia commander, and militia commander is one of the best answers to Dynamatic.
Right, and I think this is a really good talking point now to, I guess, maybe give credence to their decision to play Omega Assembly early, which is the difference between overwhelming value and tempo. The way to win this matchup is not to go as ultimate value as you possibly can. Obviously, you need the value of Elysiana to be able to win the game because it prevents the fatigue. But the player who has the most big stuff, plays the most big stuff, and goes face with the most big stuff will probably end up being the victor.
They're probably the one who ends up getting the big stuff.
Exactly. I know that when I've been watching his stream, Purple is a player who kind of despairs at this matchup where he is saying players just aren't playing their cards enough. You know, you play your biggest stuff every turn, and it turns out that's good. Speaking of playing your big stuff every turn.
And honestly, if RDU draws a bomb in this spot, he's in a pretty rough position there where he's not able to just shield slam to easily clean this up.
Oh yeah, that would have been true. Yep. However, instead we are looking at Shield Slam double Warpath, I suppose? You could go... Oh no, wait, you can't go for the Hero Power first to circle up the bombs. They would just die.
I actually think that there's a lot going on here where it's... What I'm saying is you might not necessarily be interested in killing the bombs in immediacy because you might want to have something try to absorb the damage of the Death Rattle, where the Death Rattle effect results in is a 2.5 average?
That
1,
sounds right.
2, 3, 4.
It's in the middle.
Yeah, 2.5 average. So 4 Boombot activations yields 10 damage. If you take 4 now and you can sacrifice a minion at some point, does that actually net you health in the long term? It's like weird things like that you have to consider when you're under the aggression of somebody else in these situations. Here, they have net 11, so about average.
About average, yeah. It was looking like the RDU was going to be tanking the full 16 for a second there. Which would have been hilarious, it's worth saying. For us, it's not for us.
Ah, yes, hilarious. Misfortune to him immediately in the game.
And here we go, more of the tech cards coming into play for Seiko here. Here is a situation where I am much more on your side in the don't play Dr. Boom argument. I still fully understand playing it as soon as possible.
I always understand playing as soon as possible.
Right. I would fully appreciate the argument, however, for Cairn on this turn, Alexstrasza face, hit him with it on the next turn.
This was my ploy all along. I never meant those Dr. Boom turns, and now you sound dumb! And I have a sealed envelope here from TJ.
This would be a good time
I've
for
been
a
duped.
master.
Thoroughly duped.
Oh, gosh. I don't think a callback joke is as effective when it's months old. But if you did see it, you know what I'm talking about. You probably find that mildly funny.
That probably made you breathe slightly harder out of your nose than usual. So So now with Seiko still in that position where he needs to try and wrestle back board control. He does that by playing the biggest minion in his hand.
Notice no armor as well. He managed to get armor clear.
Very good point. Very good point. Perfect time to be throwing it down. There are obviously still 2 executes in RDU's Control Warrior deck list, but you got to find the time where it's most likely to stick, and this feels like one of them.
Honestly, on the 9 mana is kind of an awkward spot too, because I think RDU would love RDU would love to not only use the Dynomatic here, but to attach a Ziliax to it. The fact that it's on 9 and he cannot either Devastator or use the Dynomatic Ziliax, it means that Alex Strauss is pretty scary in this spot.
So what you're saying is that Seiko's good at Hearthstone?
Yes.
Right. On that, we can most assuredly agree.
Light the fuses!
I love that animation. It's so satisfying to just crumble something with a Dynomatic.
I imagine it is when you're playing it, not when I'm on the receiving end of it. That is not fun.
Wow. Seiko has an opportunity to actually just go for lethal here. If he just groms and attacks face, he could have ended the game with a single bomb draw, of which there are 2.
With Warpath.
Yeah, you grom and you Warpath, and you hit face. Now, the reason why you can't do that is because you have a Discovery online. Yes. You basically could never forego that hero power.
I agree, but now with loading up the double Clockwork Goblin here for Seiko, those lethal outs are becoming more and more likely. We could see if a bomb is drawn now, for example. Seiko's getting real close to lethal here. RDU has counterplay. It's definitely not over yet with the Ziliax in hand, especially when it can be magnetized as well onto the Dynamatics or the Hecklebot. But this is juicy.
I think that RDU is in a really strange spot because the hero power here is pretty efficient, but he may have to forego efficiency for the sake of tempo.
Yes. So what does that mean? How does he get that tempo?
That's a great question, because if you Dynomatic Ziliax, it doesn't work. So I guess it would be Hero Power Ziliax?
Hero Power magnetize the Ziliax onto one of the Microbots. Is okay.
I wonder if you ever can justify...
Don't tell me Ziliax bounce.
Yeah, you can't do that.
I knew you were looking at Ziliax bounce.
Notice I prefaced it with, I wonder if you can ever justify, as in, probably don't ever do this. But think about it for a second.
Yeah, quiet, brain. Quiet. You're being dumb. I'm sorry, what?
He has to Weapons Project. He has to Weapons Project or he dies.
Oh!
Why would you do that to me, RDU? I can't take that!
Oh my god, my heart. He was like a third of a second away from losing the entire series. Who says APM isn't important in Hearthstone?
Alright, settle down.
Okay,
Settle down.
Oh my god. You know what? Control mirrors are great. Warrior mirrors are the best.
I love these!
This is
I
exciting.
crave this.
I get where you're coming from now.
Especially when Seiko just really understands the game plan very well. Like, this has been, for me, lovely to watch, where I'm like, wow, I rarely encountered this. And now that I'm seeing it unfold, I'm putting myself in RD's position, and I think he's playing, like, what you would often consider a fairly standard position.
Yes.
I think that there's been some questionable spots, but that's what Seiko's aggression is trying to capitalize on. And you can see now why the bomb plan works so efficiently. If you're able to truck away on life total, it gets really scary for RDU.
It most assuredly does, as now Seiko, again, setting up that lethal out for him. He has his eyes absolutely dead set on Grom Warpath.
Another discovery effect as well. So even when that turn gets disrupted, he has a big opportunity to continue that pressure train and open up opportunities for Grom and Warpath.
Now, obviously, the defensive capabilities for RDU are somewhat more obvious in this turn, with the Blast Shield hero power being thrown in as well, and a staggeringly good set of minions there off the Omega Assembly.
Second Ziliax.
Wow.
RDU is free to, I think he's just free to execute or Warpath in this position.
And you know what I would guess in this situation is that RDU genuinely just does not know how much danger he's in. I think it might have crossed his mind, but the plays is just the way that he's been playing out his cards indicates he's not afraid as afraid as he should be.
Big stuff.
The best size of stuff. And so now, what are we looking at? Just Cairn Bloodhoof, get it on the board for the biggest amount of stats that leaves the burst opportunities alive. I love it.
I do think that RDU is on the brink of making a pretty spectacular recovery, though.
Yes.
The Omega Devastator in his Ziliax here is going to shut down the Cairn and yield him tempo.
Large amounts of tempo.
Yes, and it's like a full recovery from the damage he's taken as well.
Yeah.
So for him to know how important that weapons project was, that he's definitely unaware of. Like, if he goes back and watches this series, he's going to be like, I almost didn't play that. Whoa. Like, that one play completely changes everything.
This is like walking down the street and a piano just falls 2 millimeters behind your head.
Is that common in the UK?
Oh, all the time.
Because I'm picturing that
it's
song,
a minefield.
That classical British comedy song, where everybody, you know, they're chasing the line and they're just walking in different places, back and forth.
Oh, Benny Hill.
Benny Hill, that's the one. Where, like, that's happening, and then you finally stop on a corner to rest, and a piano falls right next to you.
That's on loop all the time. It's a nightmare.
I'm pretty sure it's the national anthem of the UK.
And so now, as you mentioned, the comeback for RDU is in full swing. A 7/7 lifesteal taunt in play that will be getting him very quickly back up to maximum health total.
Back to the grind.
I was having fun for a second there. That's fine. Keeps the card for a roll. It's not good.
You're not happy about it.
I don't know. It's not Archivist Elysiana. I mean, obviously, he wouldn't play it if it was still in his deck. But...
Remember, Boom Review makes a copy.
Oh, yeah.
We discussed this the other day.
Oh, I'll never learn that. I will honestly never learn that.
Well, play one Warrior game.
I love that.
You'll learn very quickly.
I don't have 10 hours to spare. I'm a busy man.
Could we hover over the text of the Boom Review
No,
real quick?
no.
I don't have 10 hours to spare.
All right, mister. Oh, he can play Mountain Giant next turn because he gets some more mana. Yes, you made an idiot a mistake earlier.
I did. It was blunderous. But I encourage you to roast me for him. I kind of like roasts. There's delicious food afterwards.
What's better than a roast?
A Warrior Mirror?
Hard disagree. Although I am enjoying this one. I am actually, even though I am a skeptic of your theory of loving the control Warrior Mirrors, this one is very exciting.
I do enjoy that we have that gigantic contrast where I loathe playing Rogue, even though it's pretty fantastic and takes a lot of ingenuity at times. Derek's a big Rogue lover, and I'm a giant Warrior appreciator. A connoisseur of Warrior Mirrors, if you will.
We should start a boy band. You're the Warrior one. I'm the Rogue one. As in this game, the march towards an even state here is carrying on in full force. RDU has absolutely cemented his stability here in this game.
So I guess that brings me to the question of who's actually favored from this position.
It's an excellent question.
That is an extremely difficult question to answer.
I think it's actually not that difficult to answer. I think Seiko is in a fantastic spot. I think most of his cards being threats are better, because even though RDU has slightly more answers to deal with those, at best, that equals with both players expending their cards and it ending back at a stalemate, if you will.
Okay.
But RDU cannot pull ahead on board with his removal spells, whereas Seiko has the possibility to do that if RDU struggles to line up his removal effectively. I wouldn't say it's overwhelmingly favored for Seiko, but I'd put him in the lead for sure.
Something about Missile Launcher working is just very satisfying to me.
It's a very cool card. RDU as well does, it's worth mentioning, still have to be afraid of Hecklebot being discovered off of the,
Yes.
the delivery drone here. Obviously, Hecklebot pulling out Elysiana, which, fun fact, does not create a copy. Pulls the actual minion out the deck.
No one's going to remember this but me, but I do want to clarify that the start of the game, I said it was the second augmented Alec added for Seiko. It's actually the lone copy
The first.
that he had in there. So I was reminded of this because of the wrench caliber.
Right.
And now a Mechathune, which is found, which I love the take of Mechathune.
That's a 10-10 rush.
It's just a 10-10 rush.
Nothing but.
If he was desperate, I would also love the take of it. I mean, you're desperate.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
You have
I mean,
to hope your opponent
it
just
was the
messes
best
up.
option, right? The other two were very small. You want something big. As we've established,
So now,
that's what you want.
this is exactly what I was about to talk about, too. I think he's free to abandon a weird damage game plan and just cause RDU to have to play in a weird, inefficient way. What that'll yield him later on is the fact that he'll get more chip damage in, which makes holding bombs for Alec much more relevant.
Yes.
Additionally to that, he has now the Mechathune, he has the Grom in play, and he has an Elysiana coming later on, and he has Baleful Banker, not Youthful Brewmaster,
Right.
so he keeps an additional 7/7.
And so this is where the thinking becomes very complicated, because in the previous game, he had to turbo out his bombs because RDU could replace his deck with Elysiana in the late game, thus destroying the bombs, and he could also do that again after the first Elysiana if Seiko waited until the first Elysiana had come down, at which point Seiko would be too deep in fatigue to win the game. At this point, with Seiko having the ability to shuffle the full 20 cards into his deck, 21 if you count the Baleful Banker shuffling Elysiana in, he could potentially wait until both Elysianas have been played for RDU, then start launching the bombs right at the end of the game. Or, because both players need to stay relatively even in terms of fatigue, he could launch them in now, knowing that RDU does not have the option to play Elysiana until he gets down to fewer cards in deck, and therefore will probably have already taken the damage from the bombs.
That's a good position to be in when you have both of those options.
Oh, yes.
And because of that, he's going to say, you know what? Time to start drawing cards.
Let's go. And also time to shuffle 2 cards into my opponent's deck. And I'm sure he thought through everything I was saying in about 0.2 seconds and then just was thinking about a million other things as he went through his turn. But he ends up at the same conclusion, that you just go for it.
Wow. Artie is getting put in some tough spots.
He really is. He's feeling the
time for a master plan.
the general thinking of why people were not bringing Control Warrior. Because another really interesting point with specific respect to Specialist format is RDU is stuck on his primary deck twice. He does have a Mechathune tertiary deck, which you've got to ask, if you're not saving it for Bomb Warrior, what is it for?
I think Control Warrior mirrors.
I think also Control Warrior Mirrors is specifically what he's saving it for, in which case, it was a huge misread of the meta. It was very difficult to read exactly what the meta was going to be, and you can understand, because if he had matched up against Yala, who is the only other player to bring Control Warrior, then he'd be in a fantastic position, but he's basically left, it seems like, with only 2 decks that he can really play. Because he just doesn't want to play Mechathune. The capabilities to mess with him from Seiko are too strong. Speaking of Mechathune, is he just slamming it down?
You have to think about execute, but you've seen RDU expend one.
Armor total's nice and low.
I think the armor total's very much low enough that you're not worried about that. So the question ever comes, are you ever desperate enough to use it where you did? And Seiko's going to draw up, and it's, largely because he can expend one of the cards he's going to draw. But that's a very aggressive maneuver.
Very aggressive way to draw through your deck. Like, this is not really what I was expecting, even though I was detailing that at the start of the series, you don't have to worry about card draw too much because you have so much shuffle available with Archivist Elysiana and Baleful Banker. And what I think this is Seiko doing is realizing the advantage that his deck affords him and maximizing that specific advantage, which is he has more threats, he can generate more tempo, and therefore he wants to get down an early Elysiana. He wants to get that in play as quick as possible so that he can discover big threats rather than these removal spells in his deck, which he doesn't really care about. I'm not certain that it is the absolute best way to turbo through his deck.
I think that's great aggressive play.
Yeah, I like it.
I think you set that up perfectly.
This would be a good time for
You
a
told me that
master
you did not
plan.
understand these Warrior Mirror matches absolutely perfectly prior to us casting them, but it seems like you do.
Well, actually, just really smart. I didn't want to tell anyone.
I
But
love that used thing.
I mean, I think that's the perfect setup here. More threats means more card draw, means more tempo, means more damage. Means more wins.
oh wait, I just got a message from Ball Control saying I'm dumb. I did. That was a classic bit of banter.
You actually checked your phone, so I believed it.
Yeah, I know. That was all part of the joke.
Haha. I
don't
breathed
know why I'm going on
slightly
Ball
deeper
Control.
through my nose than I had previously.
I like that Ball Control is bringing me up on my mistakes. I'm not bitter, George, if you're watching, I promise.
This would be a good time for a master plan.
We would indeed.
I am kind of curious now about if Seiko's ever gonna just burn through Warpass at some point to make hand space, because having to forego a discovery that turn, that's a disaster.
I'd say two aspects of this actually works not so much in his favor, because if he'd gone for the Mechathune on the previous turn, armor was nice and low. He didn't have a hero power he especially wanted to use, I would say. Or at least compared to the delivery drone, which is obviously the previous option. And Mechathune would have stayed at full health. Whereas here, it's much lower health, can be easily dealt with what, Militia Commander hero power? There's plenty of ways that this can be removed
Okay then.
by Radu.
Defend the gates!
But we are again entering that situation where Rdu is undeniably running low on single target removal. And when I say single target removal, I not only mean spells, I mean mechs that he can rush in. Which is looking to me like we're getting closer and closer for the opportunity for Seiko to slam that Elysiana. Just get it down on board, start generating those big threats.
This
Yeah,
would be a good time for a master plan.
I'm trying to think about this. The more I look at his tertiary deck and the removal of shield blocks and the removal of Eternium Rover, I really love the way his game plan works out.
Yeah. I think this is absolutely the time to do it. It's a 7/7 that stays in play because of the banker.
Dragon Roar interests me a bit more than Dimensional Ripper does.
Really?
The reason being is because the Dimensional Ripper is just going to pull sometimes nonsense out of your deck. The Dragon Roar almost always yields you a big dragon. There's really not that many small dragons. It's like Marsh Drake, Fairy Dragon, that sort of stuff. But a lot of them, like Twilight Drake, Onyxia, like there's really big hits on the dragon side.
It's high.
Wrench Caliber!
Did he
He
just
found
get
a Wrench Caliber!
Okay. So it's higher value, I think, of the Dragon's Roar, but lower tempo. The Dimensional Ripper, if you hit anything even medium-sized, is a huge amount of immediate tempo. As we see, Wrench Caliber, Gorehowl, the recurring villain, which I don't think will have any way of activating the plus attack.
I think I just had a major epiphany here watching Seiko do this. So many times when I'm playing Warrior and I get into the Elysiana state, I see weapon after weapon after, and I go, God, what are these going to do? I know exactly what they're going to do. Already used at 16.
You're just going to hit him.
Just going to hit him.
Yes, that's what weapons do best.
This would be a good time
Have you
for
played
a master
Rogue?
plan.
It's just very, very different to me. I'm not used to this.
So I'll take that as a no.
It's quite appealing. I mean, seriously, like Gorehowl Gorehowl's like, I think, one of the better Warrior cards. There's just not a good way to use it.
This is like the point in the musical of our casting where I show you the wonders of going face in Hearthstone, and you're like,
Whoa.
by Jove, I think I got it.
I know about going face. It's just in this matchup, it feels strange.
That's what Seiko's been doing. He was half a second away from winning this game on the spot earlier.
True story. True story.
Unity, precision.
as RDU burning down to the rope here. You know, struggling with finding the removal. Shield Slam for 2 is not what he was looking to do whatsoever. And now, yeah, if Seiko doesn't develop a big turn here, I would be very unsurprised from RDU to just see the Elysiana come down now.
I also, this was slight technical missequence, as in the momentary panic of the end turn where he should have 2 armor right now.
Because he should have attacked first. Okay,
right.
yeah.
It's very slight, but
I think he's played both Shield Slams, though.
The point of that is to illustrate the amount of panic that he's going through the end stage, that struggling to find that removal. What's the most efficient way to do this? Do I really have to Shield Slam for 2? The answer was yes.
Yeah, and you're right, it is technically a small misplay because Archivist Elysiana could discover more Shield Slams, but
it's just to illustrate the pressure that RDU is actually feeling. It's very rare that RDU makes straight up technical misplays. Every player makes missed calls. RDU very rarely makes technical misplays. I agree.
And now for Seiko, he is perfectly demonstrating why he put these bad boys in his deck. He is just going to start and hitting Dr. Boom directly in the noggin.
And seriously, you're about to see soon Archivist Elysiana Brewmaster. You lose a lot of tempo, and it hurts.
That's a bomb.
I feel like he is on the verge of not being able to afford losing that tempo anymore.
Now for RDU, the damage is really racking up.
This story
He doesn't even feel able to go for the Harrison on this turn to destroy the weapon. He's instead destroying his deck, getting rid of the bombs in there as they stand, and trying to find some options to pull back this board. Okay, that's perfect. I like Grom. Tinkmaster?
I was trying to think, is there anything you can do with Voodoo?
Yeah, me too. I mean, Warpath, but that's probably a good card anyway. Yeah.
I think he took a Warpath in the,
okay. So yeah, I guess if he took 2 Warpaths, then that does make sense.
He did.
Yes, okay, I can fully understand that. And now, Seiko is homing in on Lethal very rapidly. If he swings face and gets a bomb, he wins the game.
You can also just find a Magnetize. Like a War Gear ends the game.
How much damage would he need? War Gear is enough. 4 damage he would need, right, to close things out. Faithful Lumi is a little bit extra, but not quite enough yet.
I think RDU's done. I think this pressure is just going to continue snowballing, and that he's not ever going to get out of it.
Just to think as well, even when these 9 cards for Seiko is expended, there's another full 10 Elysiana cards full of value to try and end the game. And here we go, 1 bomb in the deck that could end it all right now for RDU.
I'm thinking a brawl is in order here.
Yes. Now I'm starting to wonder, with the Elysiana coming down on that turn, was there a turn where RDU could have thrown it down even earlier in the game? He would have burnt through a lot of cards, but this was a miserable turn for him to do it on. He just chunked a lot of damage. The 7 armor obviously really helps to try and stabilize this. Whoa! That's the good one.
Play your own Acolyte. You need to draw stuff.
Yeah. I agree. The Voodoo Doll's too valuable.
Oh,
really
boy.
Relying on the fatigue here.
Whoa, just 7 more whenever Seiko wants it. Just 7. It's 7 mana, 7 damage. That is the equivalent of how Pyroblast works. 10 mana, 10 damage. It excites me a lot.
And Seiko has just been playing perfectly into this the entire game. He has the ability for lethal right now, I believe, or just slightly off with the swing and the wrench caliber, unless he, of course, hits both bombs straight away.
But that's approaching. That's why RDU didn't want to play the Acolyte, is he doesn't want to draw the bomb.
I guess so. But he needs to get the removal.
He needs a lot of things to go right.
He needs all the bombs to be right at the bottom of the deck. Then he goes for Elysiana to destroy them. There's just so much needs to go right here now for RDU.
And he's got to handle 4 1/1s, which is just annoying. That's a great way to handle this, though.
Muck Hunter Warpath.
Correct.
And then, well, given the way he's been playing, I guess you wouldn't throw in the Acolyte as well. You don't want to die on the spot, I guess.
He's pretty much dead on the spot, though.
Oh, okay. Yeah, you got to destroy the weapon. This makes sense. Develops a little bit of a smaller threat. But it does draw a bomb.
There's no armor.
You're good.
That's game.
That's just it.
RDU could not fend off the pressure from Seiko, and in back-to-back games crumbled.